Hello, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight. This is the channel where I, Vincent, talk into the endless abyss of space and time about music, books, movies that I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. And today we are doing the second half of a list of 10 disturbing books. If you didn't see the first half of this video, maybe go down in the video description and watch that first, because at the beginning of that I give a little intro about like my criteria and what I was thinking about when I chose these books. So this time around, we're just going to hop straight in. And the first book, which will be book 6 on the list, is Kathryn Harrison, The Kiss. Kathryn Harrison is a novelist, possibly a journalist, I'm not sure. She wrote this book in the 90s. It came out in the late 90s. From the age of 10 till the age of 20, she didn't see her father. He had another family, was married, had other children, and he was secretly meeting with her mother occasionally through the years, but she never saw him from after the age of 10. When she was 20, he came on a visit to see them. And she says at the beginning of the book that she doesn't remember whether it was her idea or her mother's idea, or at least they can't manage to agree. Each of them say that it was the other who had the idea. She's extremely happy to see her father again. She doesn't really remember him that well, I think. And what happens is that she falls into a very intense, passionate, sexual and romantic relationship with him. At least that's how she sees it at the time. She's an adult, but she's a very young adult. She has a sort of weird relationship with her mother where they're close in a way, but she also feels sort of unloved. There's a certain lack of boundaries between them. And her father essentially pursues her with enormous intensity, and she, in her desire for a male parental figure and in her overwhelming emotions at meeting him again and being close to him, and his interest in her and all of the praise that he showers her with, is swept up in this romantic and sexual relationship, which at first she very much idealizes. He's a very charismatic, intelligent preacher, very well liked in his local congregation, and they have intellectual discussions. It's almost like a sort of Nabokov Lolita situation. I'll read you a little passage of this. My father and I argue about the nature of love and its expression. These conversations begin like academic papers with suffocating theories, Latin and Greek words from divinity school, agape, caritas, not eros, but then abruptly they devolve into the personal. How can he help the way he feels for me? It's the way God made him. God gave you to me, he says. When the preacher in my father speaks, I lose what's left of my power to defend myself. The words that might send most people running are the very words to trap me. God gave you to me. Does my father believe this? He convinces me that he does, that I am his by ordained right, his to do with what he wants. It doesn't occur to me that his invocation of divine will is the tidiest and most unassailable means of exonerating us both. I will never question his sanity, although I will come to the point where it is less painful to regard my father as crazy than to conclude that he has been so canny in his judgment of my character and its frailties that he knows exactly what language to use, what noose of words to cast around my neck. What's kind of worse is that Kathryn Harrison's mother has never got over her father, still admires him, still kind of somewhat obsessed with him, talks to her daughter about how he's the only man that she ever enjoyed having sex with, and she begins to see the weird, inappropriate relationship that her daughter and her daughter's father are developing. Tries to take Kathryn to the doctors to get him to intervene. Tries to talk to her about it. Here's her mother talking. I don't know, I'm just uneasy about this. You're fixated on each other. I mean, I understand it in you. You've never had a father. Anyone would expect you to be mesmerized. But him? My mother stops and turns. You know, she says, pointing, this isn't about you. It's about me. By it, I know this right away. There's nothing more clear than this usually vague little word. She means the love my father professes, the trembling hands and hot eyes, all of what she has noticed and is frightened by. So inappropriate, so immoderate, so abnormal to love me so completely. That's what I hear her say. This book is disturbing in a lot of different ways because obviously the story of this man, this preacher who grooms and sexually abuses his young adult daughter is horrific, but it's also disturbing because you follow her through her experience of it. You can understand completely how she believed that they were in a kind of exceptional romantic relationship and how she was drawn into his narcissism. And what's even more disturbing is that towards the end of the book, it's a little spoiler, but you get the distinct impression that what her mother said was true, that her father sees Kathryn Harrison as a young version of Kathryn Harrison's mother. It's also incredible to see how this man and Kathryn Harrison are able to recruit God and Christianity into this process, this relationship, this exploitative, abusive dynamic. He drives us to his church, the place where he has long waited to do this. He unlocks the little office he's given me for my work, and he takes me on the floor by the desk. Following his lead in imposing a religious context on the act, I concentrate on mortification of the flesh. I tell myself that if I give myself over to be sullied, then by the topsy-turvy Christian logic that exalts the reviled, I will be made clean. I read so many extracts from this one because I wanted to communicate how good a writer Kathryn Harrison is and how sensitive and complex this book actually is. I've only read it once in full, over 20 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. Moving on from a memoir to a novel, the seventh book on my list is The Inheritors by William Golding. William Golding, known most as the author of Lord of the Flies, a book that many kids read at school and or are traumatized by the movie. I've actually never read Lord of the Flies, but I've read this and I've read The Spire, which are both kind of experimental, not sort of super far out, but they definitely play a lot with narrative perspective and quite linguistically creative. This book was first published in 1955 and it was published in paperback in 1961. The Inheritors is the story of a prehistoric Neanderthal family of a father, a mother, and a daughter, I think, or a child at least. They encounter a group of Homo sapiens for the first time. So the story is set at the point in time where there's a shift from Neanderthal to Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens become the dominant humanoid species on the planet. It's seen through the perspective of the Neanderthals, so there's a lot happening around them that they don't fully understand. Even though it's third person, it's almost like Flowers for Algernon or something, where the reader can see more of what's occurring than the actual characters can manage to understand. And the Neanderthals are like gentle, a little naive, and they meet this group of people, humans, who basically are their doom. It was written partly, I believe, in response to the atrocities of the Second World War, but I think there was something that happened with William Golding in his life. I don't remember if he said that he committed a sexual assault or he thought that all men were capable of it or something. At least it's written from a place of like deep guilt and a very conflicted point of view about being Homo sapien. There is a trauma at the center of the book that none of the Neanderthal characters understand and that is never fully explained. And that's one of the things that makes this book so disturbing, is that when you work out what's actually been happening, it's so much worse than the characters themselves understand. And that is such a like deeply disturbing experience in reading the novel. It's also at the end, the very end, and this is no spoiler, but at the very end, there's this image of a Homo sapien carving the handle on a knife, like one of these intricate prehistoric wood carvings on a knife. And I feel like that's kind of William Golding's perspective, is that, you know, the intelligence that allows for art, craft, creativity in Homo sapiens is the same intelligence that wipes out other species, that leads to colonization and genocide, which also is like a very disturbing perspective on being a human. Another thing to say about this book is that I'm always impressed when somebody can write a whole novel about non-linguistic characters. Another example is Jack London's Call of the Wild, where the main character, you know, is a dog. These Neanderthal characters kind of roughly can communicate with each other, but you know, they're not able to be in dialogue in the same way, or they don't have such complex interior monologues. So really impressive. Absolutely great book. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's so dark, but at the same time, very beautiful. Book 8, I had to include, even though I already made a video about it, because it is one of the most disturbing books I've read in more recent times, is Dennis Cooper's Closer, the first book in the George Miles sequence of books, which are all books about a young, beautiful guy who becomes the focus of fantasies, desires, people's sexual interest, but who is not really seen as a full individual, as a subject in his own right, is more kind of used as a screen. The book is disturbing because of those types of relationships that it presents and the perspectives, desires, and interests that it explores. Also, because of its kind of matter of fact description of quite disturbing acts, sexual kinks, attempted murder, violence, all kind of in the name of sexual exploration or human desire. There's a certain similarity between this and what the Marquis de Sade was doing, but the reason I think that Dennis Cooper is both more interesting and more disturbing than the Marquis de Sade is it's not just a litany of horrendous events. You get the real sense that it's written from a painful, lonely human perspective, trying to understand these things. A viewer of the channel whose username I couldn't possibly pronounce, so I'm putting it on the screen, wrote a very interesting comment on my video about this, where they, for one thing, compared George Miles to Laura Palmer, some from Twin Peaks, something that I think is very astute. They're both kind of complex, sad, lonely, young people who are used by the people around them as a screen for their own projections and desires and wishes and fantasies. But also drew attention to the meta aspect of Dennis Cooper's writing, that all the characters and viewpoints that he presents are ways of exploring his own inner desires, interests, tastes, fantasies. And I think that sense that Dennis Cooper is really presenting his inner world through the novel is something that deepens the disturbing nature of the writing, but also makes it kind of more vulnerable. I think that's all I'm going to say about Closer this time around, because I did already talk about it at some depth. So if you're interested in hearing more of my opinion about it, go down to the description and check out my main video. Book 9, Svetlana Alexievich, Chernobyl Prayer. Chernobyl Prayer is a book about the Chernobyl disaster which occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear reactor in 1986 in the Soviet Union. It's still the worst nuclear atomic disaster on record, and there's a large exclusion area around where the reactor was that's both in Ukraine and also overlaps with Belarus. Alexievich is from Belarus, and I believe actually from the area which was impacted by the disaster. When the reactor meltdown happened, people already started asking her why she wasn't writing about it. And she said she had no idea how to write about it. She didn't know what method to use or what approach to take. What she ended up doing eventually, which I believe is the style that she used also in other books, is that she did a large number of interviews with people, and she takes their words and she weaves them together into a kind of tapestry of first-person perspectives. So this book is the points of view of people who lived through the Chernobyl disaster and the aftermath. Here is what she writes in a chapter where she interviews herself, which I think gives you a sense of why this book is on the list. I see Chernobyl as the beginning of a new history. It offers not only knowledge, but also prescience, because it challenges our old ideas about ourselves and the world. When we talk about the past or the future, we read our ideas about time into those words. But Chernobyl is, above all, a catastrophe of time. The radionuclides strewn across our Earth will live for 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 years, and longer. From the perspective of human life, they are eternal. What are we capable of comprehending? Is it in our power to extract and decipher the meaning of this still unfamiliar horror? She writes also about how the earth under and around Chernobyl is wholly dead. The insects died, earthworms died, nothing can live within it. It's like a horror so deep that she says she never met an atheist in the area afterwards, because it goes beyond what the materialist mind can comprehend. Early in the book, there is a section told from the perspective of a widow of Chernobyl, because when the disaster occurred, all of these Soviet employees were sent out with brooms and mops to try to deal with the reactor meltdown. Not properly protected with protective clothing, no real plan. And those who didn't die immediately became extremely ill. And this one widow who talks about it, she was pregnant. She came to see her husband in the hospital, and he was dying, and they were talking about what they would call their child. And what she didn't know then or understand was that being close to him was killing the fetus. Not only that, but the people on the wards above and below got radiation poisoning just because these individuals who had been near to the reactor came into the building. This book is more disturbing than the book about Hiroshima that I had on the list earlier in the previous video. It's also just an incredible feat of writing, managing to sew together all of these perspectives from soldiers, workers, local peasants, bureaucrats, to try to tell the story of the life of the people around an event that is so disturbing and horrific that up until that series came out a couple of years ago, we hardly ever even talked about it. I've never read another Alexievich book, but I would say that this is not only one of the most disturbing books I've ever read, it's also one of the best. Highly recommended, absolutely mind-boggling, also completely brilliant. We are getting to the end of my list. This is the last one, book 10. It is by Samata Scweblin. She is from Argentina, Buenos Aires. She also wrote a book called Fever Dream prior to this, which I also really liked. But this one is probably more disturbing and also, I think, slightly better, more complex. So I chose to talk about this one. Published originally as Kuntukis, I think it's called, which was its Spanish title also. It's about a new technology that could exist now. It's a very simple technology. It's a kind of toy or object that looks like an animal. It might look like a panda or a dragon or a bunny rabbit. It's got two big eyes that are cameras and it runs on wheels. You can choose to either buy the toy and have it in your house, or you can buy a code, and the code, if you put it into an interface online, connects you to one of these toys at random. So it's almost like a version of Omegle, but like physical and permanent. So if you disconnect, you can never reconnect to it. Like the toy will die. So you buy one, and it might just sit stationary for weeks until suddenly someone connects to it, or it might come to life straight away. You never know how long it's going to take. The thing is, there's no way of the toy communicating with you really. It can make little growling sounds, I think, and it drives around on its wheels, but it can't say anything. There's no speaker on it, so you don't know who the person who's controlling the toy is, and you don't know what their motivations are. Equally, if you're on the side of the screen where you're controlling the toy, all you can do is roll around. You can't move anything, you can't intervene, you can't communicate, you can't say anything. So people get this toy. Some of them are adults, some of them are kids or teenagers, uh, or they get the code and they start playing the toy. If you've got the toy in your house, you can just guess or project motivations or ideas about who this person or who this thing is. And because, they got eyes and they look like an animal, people almost, it's a bit like with a teddy bear, a stuffed animal, people almost get the sense that this thing, is a creature. They forget that there's someone on the other side controlling it. And the book goes from story to story about people who are either running this toy, or they have one in their house, and it never really tells the story of both sides. You only ever get the perspective from one side in each case. It starts with like a super horrifying situation with some young teen girls who have got one of these toys, and some like dodgy, horrible guy, maybe, or maybe it's another teenager or whatever, like a troll basically, is on the other side, which sets the scene of how unpleasant this can be. And then it starts these more complex stories about them, many of which are not immediately disturbing, but which grow more unsettling as they go on. it's a novel with a very simple concept at its core that is a way of discussing the anonymity of the internet, dehumanization, what we allow into our house through technology, through our phones and our computers, um, and kind of the more haunting, disturbing aspects with humans' behavior, motivations, desires, fantasies, impulses. In my opinion, this book is just brilliant. I wished while I was reading it that it would be less unremittingly horrendous, but also I remember it because it isn't. And I think that it's a real strength to write a novel so bleak and at the same time so enjoyable. So yeah, English title Little Eyes. Very misleading covers often on the book. This one is better than the one that I often see where it says, like find love in surprising places or something ridiculous. Like I feel so sorry for the people who bought it and took it on holiday and read it and ruined their vacation. That, my friends, is my list of 10 disturbing books, now complete. I thought of nearly 10 more when making the list. I just kind of had to pass it out so that it would be a manageable number. So if you enjoyed this, let me know and I'll make a new one in a couple of months. If you would like to recommend me any books that you feel like are in the same sort of style as some of these, or if you would like to tell me about some of the more disturbing books that you've read, please do so in the comments. I really love getting comments. I usually respond to them if they're at any length. Like the video if you enjoyed it, please. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. If you don't want to do any of that, just know that I really appreciate you watching this video. I've started to really enjoy making them, and I hope that you got something out of it also. Peace and love. Thanks for now. Take care of yourself.